Welcome to Chamber Talk, brought to you by North Orange County Chamber, where we explore the stories and insights of leaders, business owners and CEOs from various sectors who are making a difference in our community and region. Whether you're tuning in via podcast or joining us via video, we're glad to have you here. Today in Chamber Talk, we're sitting down with somebody who has served as a police officer, a mayor of the community and a community leader, and now a candidate for California's 45th Congressional District. Chuong Vo joins us for a conversation that goes beyond headlines and campaign slogans. We're exploring his story, his leadership style, and how he approaches the major issues facing families and businesses within our region. Thank you so very much for joining us today, Chuck.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me.
So I want to go into one of those first ones and just ask people about, could you share a little bit about your journey and your experiences that shaped you to who you are today?
Absolutely. If you have the time, I would love to start from the very beginning.
Please do.
So my family fled Vietnam back when I was 1 year old. I'm the youngest of 7, so there was 9 of us. So prior to us fleeing Vietnam, we lived in a house that was taken over by the Communist Party back when Saigon fell. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, they pretty much isolated us into a small little room. And being a family of 9, that's very difficult. And so my parents decided to flee Vietnam. And we were one of the first groups that fled Vietnam by boat. And so luckily and fortunately for us that my father had connections with people with boats at the time. And so in the cover of darkness, they decided to take everybody, the whole family, the seven kids and my parents decided to sneak out and met one of the boat captain's operators. And this, by the way, the story is told to me by my sisters and brothers. So obviously, I was too young.
You're only one, weren't you?
Yes. And so interesting story to me, too, as I'm hearing it. And so as we're fleeing, me being 1 year old, the youngest in the family, the operator basically told my parents, like, you cannot take that 1 year old with you because we're hiding. We're trying to conceal ourselves. And if your baby cries, it'll give us away, our location, because at the time it was a Communist Party that took over. And so my mom said, no, I'm not leaving, me back. Thank goodness. At the same time, I also asked her, wow, that's a huge risk you took, because the risk that she took was the operator said, well, if the baby comes along and if he cries, we're going to have to cut his throat and throw him overboard. And this is the story that my mom told me and my sisters and brothers. And it was shocking to me, but that was the beginning of the journey here to America. And this is why we as immigrants appreciate America so much, because we gave up, my parents, my family sacrificed everything, including possibly my own life, to bring the family to America by fleeing a communist state of Vietnam to see the opportunities of America or whatever country we decide that we would land in. And so we fled for 3 days. We were on a boat for 3 days. Water was completely out after the first 24 hours. Luckily for us, my father and the operators were able to land us on an island in Malaysia. And at the time, there wasn't much going on in regards to boat people because, again, we were the first wave in sorts. And so they really couldn't understand what to do with us. And so we ended up being in Malaysia for a few years. And then we got sponsored over to America by another family that was already here in America, sponsored by a church in Washington, the state of Washington. And then that family from Vietnam settled in Southern California, and they legally sponsored my family over. And so that process started back when I was 3. Wow. So I arrived here when I was 3 years old, back in 78. Yeah, 78, 70, yeah, around there. And so that journey started. I became, obviously, a citizen of America. My whole family worked really hard. We were on welfare growing up. My parents were, a family of immigrant descent, no jobs, gave everything up. And we all worked really hard. And I'm proud to say today, my family and including myself, obviously, we're contributing back to the government by working hard, paying our taxes, and just giving back to a country that gave my family so much. And so proud of that. And then from there, I went to UCLA. Graduated from a school called Lusinger High School out in Lawndale. And back then, a lot of Vietnamese folks landed in Lawndale around the same time as Little Saigon. And obviously, Little Saigon in Westminster grew even bigger. But so from there, went to UCLA, met my wife there, and I decided, when I first entered UCLA, I was a biochem major, and chemistry just wasn't for me. And to back up a little bit, my interest when I was young, and I don't know if you remember, Andrew, watching Chips, Poncherello and John.
Great show.
Yeah. Well, that's the show that started my career in law enforcement.
Wow.
And we'll talk about that later. But watching that growing up as a kid, I told myself, hey, I want to be a police officer. But of course, my parents had different, goals for me, and they wanted me to be a doctor and so forth. And so when I went to UCLA, I majored in biochemistry, pre-med.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, I was like, man, I still want to be a police officer. This is what I want to do. I want to be of service to the community. I want to give back to this country that I love so much. And the way that I could do it was to become a police officer. I always thought it was an honorable profession. And like the story you said, you wanted to serve. And and just throughout the whole college experience, I kept on going back to that.
Right.
And then I realized this is what I really want to do in life, and I'm going to do what I want. And so I decided, when I was done with school, I was going to join the police department. And so I did. I put in an application and became a police officer. And I actually trained at the Orange County Sheriff's Department Academy. And I was in class 131 for all you Sheriff's Academy grads out there. And so became a police officer. And then from there, I transferred over to, I started at UCLA Police, by the way. That's where I first started.
On campus police?
On campus police, because I was a student there.
Yeah.
And then so I decided I'm going to leave. I had a good paying job at the financial aid office, and I took about a $3 pay cut to work as a service. We called him community service officer at the UCLA Police Department.
Right.
And because I wanted just to see how it would be like to work for a police department. And at the time I was a student, and I was trying to find a reason why, one, if I really wanted to do police work, or maybe it would draw me back to what my parents wanted me to do, which is pre-med, right?
Right.
But I wanted to make a decision where I would be happy with.
Right.
And so that's my personality. I always made sure that I did the things that I want to be happy doing. And so I decided, hey, it's a great experience. And then at the time, there was a sergeant at the UCLA Police Department who knew that I wanted to be a police officer. And he said, hey, why don't you apply to be a police officer at UCLA first before you decide to work for, and at the time I wanted to apply to the LA County Sheriff's Department. But they had a hiring freeze.
Oh.
And so fortunately or unfortunately, and like I said, everything happens for a reason. The sergeant said, why don't you just apply for us and work for a couple of years and then maybe lateral over to the Sheriff's Department. So I did that. And I worked for 2 years as a UCLA police officer and decided, hey, it's time for me to leave. And so I decided to apply for the Torrance Police Department, and they picked me up. And I've been there. I worked there for 26 years.
Wow.
And I just recently retired this year in June.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you for serving.
Yeah. And so during the time of my my career as a police officer, I just didn't have enough of service, I guess. And in 2015, 2017, and 2020, I was appointed as a planning commissioner. Even backing up even further, how did I get into politics? I'm sure you want to know. So as a police officer, I was happy doing my jobs, doing the things I need to do. And then I moved to Cerritos, right? Became a police officer, bought my first house when I was my mid-20s, I believe. Let's see, 21, 22, 3, 4, around 24, 25, I bought my first house in Cerritos. And then, married my wife, who was, who I met at UCLA, ended up getting married. And then we had our first child, and, and being just a new parent with a young boy, we did all the new parent stuff, took them to the parks, the facilities, the gyms, the pool. And so when I was at the Cerritos Park East swimming pool, I was giving my son a shower after he just swam in the swimming pool. And then I heard some sounds in the bath room area, right? And one of the stalls, and that's kind of strange. And I noticed, I hear a little kid sound, just playing in the water, in the toilet water. And so I went back there, just being, just who I am. I say, hey, and then I looked, there was a little girl, I remember. It was a little girl in a boys' locker room, bathroom. And so I looked around, there was no parents or anything. So I walked her back out to the front desk and I said, hey, you have a little girl that's and I don't see any parents. And plus I had my child still in the locker room. I told him, hey, so I rushed back there and I gave it to the staff there. And then I was done taking care of my son, came out and realized the girl's gone and the staff's still working. And so I just asked simply, hey, what happened to that little girl? And the staff told me that, her 14-year-old brother came by and we gave her to him. And I was like, well, okay. He already lost her once and he's only 14. Like, did you not bother to try and contact a parent or an adult? And they're like, well, no, we didn't. I said, dude, what is your policy on lost kids? And at the time, it's interesting because fast forward later, I'll tell you why policy is so important when I became a council member. At the time, they said, well, we don't have any type of policy on that. And I was shocked. And so they said, if you have a problem with it, contact the city council.
All right.
And that right there.
Spark.
And that was the spark. Right. And I was like, well, so I contacted the city council. They ignored me.
Cool.
Sent an email, ignored me. No response. Left a message, the city council ignored me, right? And this is where this is how I am as a council. Is I remember that, and I will forever return phone calls,
right? Because
of that one experience.
That makes total sense,
right? And so, so nothing happened, and so I decided, hey, why don't I just go ahead and instead of being upset about this, just help out. Yeah. So I decided to turn in an application. At first, I said, I'm going to run for council, right? And so I walked into the city clerk and said, what? I want to run for city council. And they're like, never involved in my life in city government other than being a police officer. And I remember the city clerk at the time just brought out a stack this thick. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to do all that just to run for city council. So you got to fill out all these forms. I'm like, let me think about it. So I went back and said, you know what? I don't know if I can be a city council right now. Let me look at some other ways. And so I started researching, and then I researched that the city council appoints commissioners and committee members. And at the time, there was this councilwoman. Her name is Carol Chen. And I looked it up. She had one opening on the safety committee.
Oh, wow.
Which is right up my alley.
In your bracket there, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I'm like, hey, I'll turn in an application and I'll put her down as the person I want to work for. And a couple of weeks go by, and Carol Chen's her name. Remember that, because today I blame everything on her, because I'm where I'm at because of her.
Right.
And then so she looked at my application and called me and interviewed me and appointed me on the safety committee in 2009, I believe. Yeah, 2009. And then a year and a half later, I became the vice chair. And then she came up to me and says, Chuong, I want you to consider being my planning commissioner. I'm like, Carol, I'm a police officer. I love what I do. I'm on the safety committee, completely in my well.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing. And she just said, well, I see something in you that I see potential in you, and one day you're going to run for city council. I looked at her, I just laughed. I'm like, you're crazy, Carol. And, I appreciate her so much today because she saw something in me that I didn't see at the time. Sure. And that's just from me my service on the committee at the safety committee. So I remember she said, like, you have leadership roles that I see you can fulfill. You're very well spoken, and you have the thought process when you make decisions. And when she told me that, I was like, well, to me, it was just all natural. And then, and so I accepted her appointment, and I became a planning commissioner. Just understand, a police officer getting appointed as a planning commissioner for development, right, in the community. I mean, there's a huge gap, right?
Yeah.
And where she told me that I see that you are somebody that will learn and are open to learning new things.
Right.
And so I did. I learned how to understand projects, architectural designs, setbacks, codes, and and then I served on the planning commission for ultimately about 4 years. And then she said, Chuong, it's time for you to run for city council. Wow. And I'm like, you're crazy. I'm just learning to be a planning commissioner.
Sure.
And so, yeah, no, so I decided to run in 2015. I lost that election.
Okay.
And then decided to do it again in 2017. I lost that election by a small handful of votes,
Right.
less than 30 votes. And so it made me realize I got to work harder.
Right.
Because, not that I gave up that second election, but I remember the day of the election when the polls were about to close. I just remember I worked that morning, and I just, it's time to just say, hey, whatever happens, happens.
Right.
And then I lost by, less than 30 votes. I want to say 23 votes, but
they're very close when it comes to city elections,
yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
So every vote counts.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Right. And so 2020 rolls around. I told myself, I'm going to walk all the way until 8 p.m. when the poll closes.
Right.
And I'm glad I did, because I knocked on the door at 7:45, and there was this family. He was a retired police officer, and he had a family of adult kids that wasn't even planning on voting. And I was able to knock on his door, and he said, oh, we didn't even know that you're running. We want to support you. And he decided to go out and vote, took his whole family and voted. That year I won by over 70-something votes.
Right.
So I'm glad I worked, and I told myself, and that's the mentality I have today, is that I work until I just can't anymore. And so that's how I got here, and I became a city council member. First got elected in 2020, sworn in on April Fool's Day.
Oh, well, my birthday.
Oh, that's your birthday. Hey, we have a connection. And then also that was the time when COVID struck, and the city the whole world just stopped. And so I joke with folks. I said, I'm a great.
Good job.
Yeah. On April Fool's Day. And then I remember my swearing in was through Zoom.
Right.
And so there was no really contact. So I joke with people, though. I say I'm a really good COVID leader, because that's all I learned at the first couple of years.
Course.
And, and I tell people this all the time, that everything happens for a reason. I just told you that.
Mm-hmm.
And I strongly believe there's a reason why I didn't win in 2015 and why I didn't win in 2017 and why I won in 2020.
Yeah.
Because that's when COVID hit, and we really started strong leadership. And somebody that understands public service.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was only one of many on the council, but I was glad I was part of it.
Right.
Because, things could have been a lot different.
Yeah.
That first year, everything got shut down. I remember thinking, and I'm always constantly thinking of what I can do for the people.
Right.
Like, that is my ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Is how to service my community and my people that elected me. And that truly is what I feel an elected official should think about every single moment, is why did they put you there? I have a quote that, I say a politician serves the seat, whereas a public servant serves the people who put you in that seat.
Right.
And to me, that just means, I'm getting chills just thinking about it, because I truly believe it. And I just kept on thinking, like, what can I do? Because everything's shut down. The community is so sad right now.
Yeah.
And tough. And then the holiday seasons were coming. Christmas is right around now. Actually, it's funny. So back in October of 2020, because I was part of the Torrance Police Department, the Torrance Police Officers Association had a Santa float, over 50-something years tradition, and they just started up this year again. And that Santa float would drive, and I would help, and they would drive down almost every street in the city of Torrance and bring Santa to the residents instead of them having to come out. Because at the time, Cerritos, they shut down the Christmas tree lighting, Santa Island, they shut everything down. So I'm like, you know what? Let's bring Santa to the residents. And because it's COVID, we'll just drive down the street. Santa can wave at everybody. Everyone can come out.
Cool.
And so, in October, I initiated that. I wrote up the plan. I asked for sponsorship. And it didn't cost us anything that year, because I was able to secure donors.
Nice.
And then that was the first year of the Christmas Santa float. And it went for the whole time I was on council.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and I remember buying that Santa float from Fiesta Floats, because at the time they were part of the Rose Parade.
Right.
Well, everything shut down.
Yeah.
Well, they had floats just sitting around. They're like, just taking up space.
Right.
And I remember we bought that float for $10,000. And then it includes the decorations and the Christmas decorations and everything. And just mind you, when I started researching this, just to get a plain trailer with nothing on it
Right.
was around 15,000.
Yeah, but
Brand new,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So this was a real float
Mhm.
that was in the Fiesta floats. And so, but yeah, so I did that. And then every year after that, I was constantly thinking what I can do for the community. And I was really proud of my service on the city council and concurrently working as a police officer,
Sure.
and I would work graveyard weekends just so I can serve the community. And also on top of that, I was a father of 2 boys.
Right.
I was fortunate that I had a job that I can pick my schedule.
Yeah.
And so I worked weekends graveyard so I can make sure I take them to school in the morning, pick them up after school because my wife's a teacher. She leaves early in the morning, comes home late in the afternoon. So we were fortunate that I could rearrange my schedule to, take care of our 2 boys. And so, and in doing so, I was available to also run for office. So it all worked out. It's a lot of work. I remember people always tell me how you do it, and it's difficult.
Yeah, it is.
But when you have a passion, though, it pushes you to do it.
So I'd like to go back a little bit in your story there, because there were a few things that you mentioned.
I'm gonna have some tea while you're at.
Oh, please do. You were, you came over here. You were like about 3, you said, and then obviously later on, go Bruins, because I know my wife loves. She went to the same university.
Yes.
So she'll definitely watch this podcast.
Yeah. You moved up.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I definitely married up. You mentioned that obviously, the struggles your mum and dad went to, and to get from where you start from 3 all the way through that. Obviously, for you were growing up in America. What did mum and dad do to support you all? Because, I mean, people don't realize this, that they're coming to a country, probably didn't really speak the language, everything's new, but they still had to. And yes, I understand you can get food stamps, but you've got to help
it was a lot of work for my dad. And even for my mom, actually, and my dad had passed. But my father, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional because, my parents sacrificed a lot for us.
Yeah.
So my dad, when he came here, he came from a fishing community in Vietnam. So he purchased a boat completely run down, and he worked day in and day out, night, and just constantly worked on this boat at the boat yard in Redondo Beach, over there, King Harbor.
Oh, wow.
And he brought this boat back to life all by himself, and built a fishing boat, got his fishing license, worked, and then he became a fisherman out of King Harbor in Redondo Beach. My mom was a stay-at-home mom because she had to raise 7 kids. There were 7 kids, right? Me being the youngest, so she had to stay home. Excuse me. While he was working, my mom was raising us, and being just a fisherman by himself, he didn't make much money.
Sure.
So we were also on welfare.
Right.
He did what he could, but and at the time we were on welfare, and I remember the struggles. And then I look back and I remember. I appreciate it now, but as a young kid,
of course,
I remember my mom would take me to a store called Alpha Beta. Okay. I don't know if you remember that store. No. It's a grocery store, and we had to walk probably about a good 10, 15 minutes to get to the store. And being I was the youngest, she would always take me, and I remember just buying stuff. If they were off by 1 penny, she would be so upset because 1 penny to her was very valuable for us, right? And she would have me argue with them because I was the only one. She didn't speak English that well. And so I remember I had to argue with the cashiers, make sure they ring her up correctly. And I remember back then I was thinking, gosh, I was so embarrassed. But looking back, because of what she did and what my dad did, it instilled in me value, respect.
Yeah.
Respect is the number one thing. And then also, it's just, looking back, my mom collected aluminum cans. She would walk around the neighborhood, pick up aluminum cans, recycle those. She did whatever she could as a stay-at-home mom to also bring value to our family. And she would just constantly do that. And, she raised 7 kids.
That's a lot.
In America.
Yeah.
In Vietnam would have been a different story because the support group, the network of families there, our uncles and aunts and so forth. But, my dad and my mom just had us, and we just had them, and it was a constant struggle. But where I'm proud of is that it instilled in me the hard work that I'm passing on to my kids. And then the constant, the values, the family values. And it's just, that's why when I sit here running for Congress, people don't realize that I value America. You know, it's not just because this is a great country. This is a country that gave my family our future.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be where we're at without America and the veterans that fought in Vietnam. You know, and I want to mention that too. It's like when I see veterans, and especially Vietnam vets, you know, so many people go up and thank them.
Yeah.
But
to meet you, it really means something.
It means something to me.
Yeah.
Because when I look at them, you know, it's like they don't even know the impact they had in my life.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and then here I'm running for Congress because of that.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
It really is. I don't wish to quote it because I don't know from 100%, but I do believe, and it kept coming up in my mind as I was listening to you there, and I do believe it might have been President Reagan who said it, but he was talking about how folks who are immigrants, they get the opportunity to come to America.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were saying, to help.
I know exactly what I'm off. Maybe this got a lot of quotes. Yeah.
Well. But if you're American, you've only got America. You haven't got it somewhere else to go. And the idea of it is if you're going to be working in politics, you really need to make sure that this country is great. And I wanted to tie that in because I'm feeling this from you a little bit. Well, quite a lot actually, is you serving a purpose here. So where does that play what you want to do in Congress?
Well, you know, to me, because this is such a great country, they gave so many opportunities to so many people on this land and land overseas, right? Immigrants. And this is a country made of immigrants, right? I mean, there's this argument that the first people that came here were colonists, settlers, and I'll give you that. But after that, this country is built on immigrants, right? Yeah. And these are American immigrants today. And so I'm proud to say I'm one of them. And what I like to build on is to make sure that America comes first. You know, I know that's not just like this catch-all saying, right?
Sure.
Right. But truly, if, you know, like any time if you have kids or if you play sports, you tell them, hey, take care of yourself first.
Right.
Before you take anybody care of anyone else. Like in an airplane. When the oxygen mask comes down, what do they
on first
before you put your kids,
because
right?
you can't help the other person.
So America should always come first, because if we want to help anybody else, we have to be strong. Yeah. We got to be healthy. We got to be financially stable. We have to have the resources, and we have to be able to provide for ourselves before we can provide for anybody else. So that's one big thing for me, and how important it is that I want to ensure that those people who know that I'm up there, I'm always thinking about the people that put me there. And those are Americans. And I don't care what ethnicity you are, what background you are Americans to me, as long as you have legal rights to vote. You're the person I'm supporting and I'm going to work for.
Now, I want to touch on, that's a great segue into the next bit. So, you know, obviously, when someone's running for office, there's certain things that are more important to them than others, and that's why people vote. You've got quite a few. We're going to touch on those today. So the first one really rules into public safety and community trust. And public safety is obviously a major point on your platform, but it's also a major point for all of us as citizens, right? And the country as a whole. Yes. Rather than just ask you different things, I know you've got, you know, what you'd like to share about it. Where do you feel this is going to play a big part for let's start at home, the 45th district before we move on to everything else? Where do you sit with that?
Well, the 45th district isn't unique in itself on safety. I mean, crime is, you know, there's no boundaries for crime.
No.
There's no safety only for certain areas, right? You know, there's not something we can just also put up a wall in a sense, right? Locally anyways. But no, safety to me is a problem, not just in the 45th, like you said, but it's really just throughout. And, you know, as a police officer, I see it firsthand here locally, and then statewide, we have a problem. It's gotten a little better, but not to where it should be. As a police officer, I've seen how many times that when cops do their job, they get basically backslapped and saying, hey, thanks for doing your job, but we're going to release this crook.
Right.
right? Or you're out there working your heart out, and we're not there to support you. So in the 45th, what I plan on doing is really easy. Is to be there and be present for not just the people that we serve, but the officers, the police officers that serve them, and make sure they have the resources. Because at the end of the day, public safety to me is a bedrock of communities. If you don't have safety, you don't have really anything else, right? You have concerned people that don't want to come to your neighborhood to do business. You have citizens that don't want to get out of their house because they're worried about getting robbed, mugged, or hurt, right? Safety is the bedrock of any civilized community.
Right.
And in order for us to thrive on that, as we got to make sure that the people, one, believe that they're safe, because that belief is huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't provide the resources for them to believe it in the efforts of helping the law enforcement effort to make sure that they have the resources to training to do what's right for the people they serve. And so as the 45th in Congress, I'll make sure that those individuals that need the resources get the money from Congress, make sure they get the training from Congress, passed down through the local levels, but ultimately the money comes from the federal government and of course state. But to me, we need to provide the resources for them.
Now, having experience as a police officer, and then also having experience on city council commission, and then obviously being a city council member, and then even being the mayor, how do you see, or where do you see the challenges in sort of working, I'm not going to say fix, but working on this particular thing? Because obviously, as you mentioned, then you've got cities, you've got states, you've got counties, you've got all these different people deciding what they want to do. How do you feel you're going to be able to get them all together and, hey, come on?
What's interesting is that I'll back up a little bit. When I was, first elected during COVID, like I said, and then slowly as we were getting out of COVID, I attended the mayor's conference, the U.S. mayor's conference and the National League of Conference. And I was part of the safety committee appointed on the safety committee for those. And I remember sitting there and then during the time when there was that civil unrest during the COVID days, me being an active police officer still working. And I remember hearing other mayors from other cities throughout the whole country say, we need to reimagine police. We need to defund. And they used those words.
They did.
Defund the police. And so I was sitting there as a police officer like, man, I didn't feel appreciated. I felt basically pushed aside. All the work that we've done to get to where we're at to make sure that our community is safe meant nothing to these folks.
Yeah.
Because all they cared about is talking points that was popular for their base, right? What they didn't know is that there's cops actually working the streets, having to deal with the stuff that they're just talking about. And so fast forward 2 years later, 3 years later, when all that's done, and then the same folks that sat in that same committee, now we're asking, hey, how come we can't retain police officers? How come we can't hire police officers fast enough? What can we do? And I remember looking at them, I just shook my head. I was like, and I said something. I said, well, there's a reason why. You're same folks that were talking about defunding police, you're the reason. And so as an elected, is that first off, we need to stop talking for what we think is popular at the time or talking points, right? We need to really act the way we truly should act to bring the right services to our community. Is stop playing with politics. Police officers have a job to do. Communities expect it from police officers. We can continue to properly train them, give them the resources, but never, ever, ever put them on the butcher block saying they're the reasons why that our community is the way it is.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's politics that causes it. And we as politicians should recognize that we are the problem when we don't recognize the solutions and just constantly talk about talking points that are just popular to say, but yet you don't do anything. So the same group that said, hey, let's reimagine, defund the police, are the same group that said, we don't know why.
Right.
And so we need to stop that. There's a huge disconnect. And the disconnect is really, we got to stop being politicians and being public servants. And our public service starts with our community and with the law enforcement. And since we're talking about safety, to me, that's the number one thing that brings in business, families, good schools, and just without safety, you don't have
nothing there, really, have you?
I mean, I wouldn't say we have nothing. We'll just have crime.
Right.
And guess what? We're in California. We're in, LA. Well, you're in Orange County, but I'm from LA County. Crime is serious right now, and people don't recognize it because they don't want to, even though they know it exists.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was on council, there was a lot of things I did at the city level. I just got tired as an elected when, me with the background as a police officer, I knew what we could do.
Mm-hmm.
I just got tired of the same excuses at the federal level and even at the state level. It's like, oh, we can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it because of whatever reason. So I just said, hey, you know what? What can I do at the city level with the money that we have?
Right.
So with that, I remember one of the biggest complaint was commercial enforcement. Our cities didn't have a commercial deputy, which control the trucks going up. So I started that. We had complaints about commercial enforcement for years, but no one really did anything. So I said, hey, why don't we hire a deputy, train him, and become a commercial? So I did that. I brought drones to the city.
Oh, wow.
The sheriffs did not have drones for the local stations. I was a drone operator as well, and I helped the Torrance Police Department start the drone program back in 2016. So I brought that. I'm like, and we have money, we'll pay for it.
Right.
The Sheriff's Department didn't really want to pitch in, so hey, we'll pay for it. And then I brought outburst cameras, which is the automatic license plate readers.
All right.
These are things that I said, what actions can I take to actually bring forward some things for our community instead of just talking about it?
Right.
And so I did. I was proud of it. And the thing about being elected, what I noticed is I wouldn't say most, a lot of electeds would do this. They say, I want this, I want that, and then just forget about it.
Right.
So in my office, I have a list that I put on a drywall erase board.
Right.
And I put down.
It's going to stay there.
It's going to stay there until I check it off.
Right.
And the reason why is that, one, I was getting older, and I didn't want to forget the promises I made during my campaign running for city council, but also the promises that I made while I'm on council, the things that we need to do. So every time there was something new, I would write it down, put a check box or put a box, and then as it gets complete, I would check it off. And so the one thing about electeds, they ask for things and they don't follow up with it. And then also it gets kind of disappears unless the community continues to come back and then up in arms in it. And then now it's a big deal because the community got tired of waiting.
Right.
So I didn't want them to have to be tired of waiting. I wanted them to see results. And so that in order to do that, there was actionable things that I wanted to make sure that I carried through and followed through. And so that's what I did. And I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, yeah, you certainly did, without a doubt.
Yeah.
It sort of leads us into, because as you were talking about safety there, and of course, if an area is not safe, you're right. Businesses are going to move out. People are going to eventually go, well, I don't really want to live here. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Example of that, San Francisco.
100%.
Yep.
Schools, we hear often about gangs, and, that's a prime area for them, or even drugs. So moving on to that sort of moves into the economic pressures and the cost of living as well. Big spit word right now as everybody's going, well, we're going to do affordable housing, which really isn't affordable in what we generally would
is anything affordable?
Ask about affordable.
Yeah.
Because they're taking it from an average. But I know that obviously that's something that's on your mind with the cost of living and the pressures about that. Would you like to share a little bit more about where you're looking to?
Sure. So affordability is huge, right? Because I'm not rich. I was a working person. I would like to think that I'm an example of probably the average person that has a job, has a family, and we're constantly trying to figure out how to pay the bills. I'm not saying that's difficult, but I think I worked hard, like most families work hard. And what we're tired of seeing is that our government is constantly taking that extra money that we're working hard away. Right. So affordability, one is I want to make sure that taxes are reasonable for our country. Government constantly over and over again, instead of just trying to find solutions, the easiest thing to do is tax folks.
Right.
It's so easy to ask for more money.
Sure.
When what you should do is balance your books, find ways to save, cut things that are unnecessary. And that's kind of what I did in Cerritos.
Right. It's not really asking for money because it's tax. They just take the money.
Yeah. Well, they say there's two things that are for sure in your life: death and tax.
Right.
Right. But I understand the tax is there's a need for it.
Sure.
But there's got to be reasonable. So affordability is giving people back the money that they work so hard on. There's states out there that don't even have state income tax. How are states like that surviving when California here takes so much from us? And do we see the results?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Do we see the results? I mean, I see roads that are still in despair, and I see buildings that need to be fixed. And Orange County is unique because you do see some good work in Orange County, right?
Sure.
So affordability to me is important. And when you brought up affordable housing, it's so easy. Just say, let's just take money and make affordable housing.
Right.
How about we take that same money and give the resources to the folks that need affordable housing to make them successful, make them earn a living, and then make them buy a house.
Right. The American dream.
The American dream that I'm living.
Right.
And so many people can.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, to me, government, depending on where you live, it really they put a little pressure point on your life.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for many people. It's difficult for those that work hard and earn their money and then realize they have to give a third of their money, a quarter of their money to the government. I mean, and you understand taxing wise, right? And I'm going to go into a little bit is, people think, oh, income tax or federal tax. And it's about 20% or 60. Depends on your tax bracket, right? But the income that you make gets taxed. And then that money that you have in your bank now has already been taxed. But when you go buy something with the money that's already been taxed, you get taxed again.
Yeah.
And then you go buy a house, it gets taxed again.
It's taxed yearly.
And it's like taxing over taxing. So if you already been taxed for the money you made, why should you go when you go use that same money that the government already took?
Yeah.
And they tax you again. So from $10, they say they take $3 already. And now you only have $7. And then when you use that $7 to go buy groceries, they tax you on the $7. And so really that $7 was only worth $5. And then when you go buy a car, you get taxed on that, And so I think we really need to look at our tax system and make sure that we're doing it for the good of the order, but protect the money for the people that give us the money.
I feel that's a real breakdown project, isn't it? Because you think about it, it's a system. It's not just like you're saying, oh, well, you can take this away or you add that. No, you've got to almost go back to the drawing board and really
you got to work,
figure it out. You got to work.
You got to work.
Yeah.
It's so easy to say, give us more money.
Yeah.
But when you have people that are willing to work and sit down, and I'm not just talking about staff now. I'm not talking about,
I understand.
I'm talking about the electeds.
Yeah.
It's so the electeds have so many staff members.
Yeah.
And time and time again, the staff members do everything.
Yeah.
And the electeds just go to meet and greets and shake hands, right? We need our electeds to actually work. And I'm not saying they don't.
Right.
But I'm saying that should be
takes all hands on deck.
That should be your role.
Yeah.
You shouldn't just get elected and then disappear.
Yeah.
If anything, once you get elected, that's when the work starts.
Right.
And that's when it's even harder. Campaigning is hard.
Yeah, it is.
But once you get the job, now everything you promise, you better deliver. Right. And then granted, sometimes you don't know what you're getting into and you learn as you go and then you realize, oh, some of those things I promise, it's hard to deliver.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you don't try.
Yeah.
You have to try.
Yeah, that's good to keep on it. Keep it on that board until you've done it, right? So, moving a little bit into, again, basically the same thing. But part of our money, the billions that have been invested federally into homeless programs, and have been, there's lots of mixed results and lots of mixed views of whether we're going the right way or we're not. Again, what's your take on all of that?
We are definitely not going the right direction. I mean, when we can't account for billions of dollars that the public has given to the state, and there's no record keeping of it, we're going in the wrong direction. I see it over and over again when we spend money on shelters. Those shelters aren't really being used in a way that these people who need it deserve, right? There's no programs in place. It's frustrating to me over and over again when we have people who really don't know the business say that they are going to do what's right.
Right.
Right. For example, public safety. How many times elected officials say, "Oh no, public safety is my first priority." I understand. They've never worked a day in a boot inside a police car, ever putting handcuffs on anybody. Right. Same goes with homelessness. Right. You have to have the experts that do it, and stop getting in their way. But then also you got to make sure the people that are doing it correctly.
Right.
There's got to be accountability.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be supervision. As you know, in Orange County, we had an elected county supervisor that swindled money from the people to his family, right? And so we can't have that. But understand that's probably still going on. We just need to identify it. We need to hold people accountable. And just recently, I believe someone in Beverly Hills just got arrested, indicted, just recently in Beverly Hills, a developer for doing the same thing.
Right.
So we need accountability. We need people who say that we're going to use this money for the right reasons to be watching it instead of just kind of going off on their own. Okay, you guys, no, you have to have professionals. You got to actually understand the problem, and then you have to have accountability. So it's really difficult for me to say if we're going in the right direction when we still have homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually worse than ever. Right? The more money we spend, the more homeless people we have, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so where's the money going? Right? It's going to developers. It's going to nonprofits and I have to say, nonprofits are great, but when you have nonprofits that have individuals that are out there spending on money on their own for themselves, and a small percentage of it only goes to the people that are supposed to help.
It's the wrong way around, isn't it?
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Nonprofits, they're only nonprofit because they spend the money on staff and so forth, and I get it, right? But you got to do it for the right reasons. And unfortunately, sometimes I feel like the homeless problem, they don't want to solve it, because if they do, then there goes their income, right? So we need people that really want to fix it. And, there's people out there that do, and it's unfortunate, but we can't have them living on the streets either, right? It's, to me, that itself is difficult to see when there was laws in place before that says that, the police can't touch them unless they have a shelter, so we're going to leave them there. No, we need to do something to get them off the streets, to make sure they do have the resources, and we need to allow law enforcement to be able to deal with that as well.
Do you, on that side, obviously, being in Congress, very different to your local electives
Mm-hmm.
and everything else. And again, you've got all these other entities, let's say, that are deciding how they want to play the game. How do you feel that Congress could maybe better work with the state, let's say, because it starts at the top, doesn't it?
Yeah, let's all get along.
That's a good one.
Let's all get along. At the end of the day, if you're in public office, you're in public service. So why are we fighting over who serves who, when we serve them, and with what? Let's all work together. Let's work together to provide the money and the resources that the taxpayer give us to do the job. And so we need to build relationships. We shouldn't be burning bridges. We need to work hand in hand. And that's kind of how I roll, is that, hey, if you can help me, I'm going to help you. And you mentioned Ronald Reagan. He's actually one of my favorite presidents, by the way. Ronald Reagan, I was younger then when he was president, but Reagan has a saying, like, when you don't care who gets credit, you can get a lot done.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe that. Just get the work done, because I'll tell you, as an elected, a lot of them just want the credit, especially when they don't even do it, but they're a part of the vote.
Right.
And they'll go out there and say, I'm like, fine, go ahead. Say all those things, but we got it done.
Right.
And I'm in the background just knowing it was me that helped.
You got it done.
Yeah. And I'm like, hey, you go out there and announce it. I'm okay. I don't really care who gets credit for it, but the people now have it.
Yeah.
So
which is most important, really, isn't it?
And so, and your actions always speak louder than your words anyways. I really believe that. And the people who do know me, they know what I've done. I don't need to go out there and say, hey, look at me. I did this for you. They'll feel it, right? They either feel it in the fact that they feel safer, lower in crime, the money, the cuts, and all that stuff. But yeah, I think with all these stakeholders, what we need to do is just make sure that we all get along, because right now it's very divisive.
Right.
from the federal all the way down to the state,
All the way down, yeah.
and politics in general, right? Politics in general. And it always has been. But I'll tell you, it's just gotten so far left and so far right. We just need to figure out how to bring everyone back, because you don't solve anything when you're constantly fighting, right? When you have, when you argue with a friend, you can get things done. But when you argue with an enemy, you'll never get things done, because they're always enemies, right?
Mhm.
So, I'd rather befriend you and then disagree than,
Fight it out and not get anywhere.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I think we just all need to figure out how I can help you and you can help me to give back to what the people expect. We need to stop this bickering. We need to stop. And it's easy to say, right? But for some reason, politician takes things so personal, and it hurts them, and they forget that you have to have thick skin, one, for doing this. Trust me, I know. And then the other thing is that, if you just do your job,
Yeah.
people will love you.
Another thing, part of this is, and you as a serving or past serving police officer definitely run into this a lot, whether it's to do with homeless or obviously whether it's to do with people with criminal intent. What's your stance regarding mental health? Like, it's a big problem.
It is a big deal.
And I see it as, it's such a concertina thing, because you've got mental health from folks who got stuck through COVID and now they're being on their own and they're dealing with that. And then you've got other types of more very serious mental health issues.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like you said, I do have experience in that. I've seen the worst of the worst.
Right.
I've taken people for what's called 5150 holds. I've seen folks speak to aliens. And I've also responded to families where the kids is just out of hand.
Right.
And when I say out of hand, it's just because they're just not listening to mom and dad. So I see both extremes. I see the ones that speak to aliens, right, and they talk to themselves, and I see the family that suffer because their child may have gone through COVID, social media, whatever the reason, and they're suffering from mental health because of that. And, that gap is huge, right? Mm-hmm. And so I do believe there's a place for mental health treatment, mm-hmm. But then we also have to bring back the family network as well. I think as mainstream it is because of social media, so easy for folks to look at a cell phone and give it to their kids and so forth. I think that we need to bring the family values back. We need to make sure that we raise our kids the way we want to raise them, not how social media thinks they should be raised. And I say this because kids all the time see things on their phone, social media, iPad, and think that's real.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why today there's so many youth that are against authority, mm-hmm. right? Because they really think that, hey, this is what's on social media, and so I have rights, Right. So I just think we need to treat the mental health with the resources we have,
right?
But don't forget the family values and the family nucleus that starts at home, and you build, and you hope that the values are bestowed upon these kids, and the parents are parenting again, and the families are being families again to hopefully prevent them to stray. And I say this because I see this. It's like, I'll give a good example. I responded to a call of a mother that her 14-year-old just wouldn't do his homework. Mm-hmm. So she called the police because he would talk against her and just be just rude and obnoxious and just outright just being a terrible child. And so she called the police. And so when I got there, I'm like, why is this a police matter? Right? It should be a family issue, right?
Right.
And so when I spoke to the mom, I remember this is years ago, and the mom was concerned because the kid told the mother that, that the school taught me that if my parents discipline me, I can call the police.
Right.
And so the mom didn't want to get in trouble, didn't want to get arrested.
Sure.
And so I just said, he told you this? And she said, yeah. I said, well, what would you like to do? I said, I'd like to discipline him. And I said, well, you go ahead. And I told that child, I said, son, you don't have the right to call the police when your parents discipline you. Beating you is something different.
Right.
but she's going to discipline, ground you, and so forth. Don't waste our time. This is not a police matter.
Right.
This is a family matter. And I just gave your mom the authority to be a mother again. We never had a call back to that house ever again. And we had calls before that because the mom felt concerned. She didn't have the information, right?
Sure.
To be the mom that she wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so, and I bring that up because in today's age, raising family is tough. You got, like I said, social media. So many other people are trying to raise your kids.
Right.
And parents sometimes forget that's their job.
How do you, as a parent, right? Because you've hit a very good point there. And you're not the only one who thinks like that. We've actually had a local council member who believes very much the same, that it really starts with home. Like families need to take
Everything
responsibility with things like that. But how do we present that? How do we allow families to know or share or teach? Like how do we get that motion going?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, and I don't know why it happens with me, is that there's lots of families that call me, maybe because I'm a police officer, maybe because, just
you seem to take everyone's call, so maybe that could be one.
So I'll get parents sometimes, and I remember like when I lived at my old house, the dad across the street would call me, maybe because I was a police officer. His son was acting up, and I know his son really well. And, he would call me and says, Chuong, hey, my son, he's not listening to me. Can you talk to him? Right. And then, so that's, to me, is a problem.
Right. Yes, of course.
So how do we fix it? Right.
Yeah.
We fix it by making sure our parents know how to discipline, two, but to raise their child in the way that we believe is good for our neighbors, our community. And so much time, parents are scared to do what's right because they're worried, right? They're worried about mental health, that, oh, my child's going to hate me. If I do something bad, they may call, the police, like that one mom. And so I think we need to make it clear that parents can be parents again.
Right.
How often do you hear this? I don't want to discipline that child because I want him to love me. I want him to, I want to be happy. Well, that's something that you need to understand. You need to fix, right? They'll love you, respect you, and grow up to be good members of the community. But if you don't parent, that's the problem. So to answer your question, the way I do it is how my parents raised me. I can't fix somebody else's way of being raised, right, or family values. I just know that this country needs more of it. We need to understand that our problems do start at the home if we don't fix it. And I just wish that parents can identify these problems early and take initiative early. And here's another issue. It's like some parents, and I everything I'm telling you is from experience.
Right.
Some parents tell me they don't want to do anything because they're too young. We don't want to yell at them because they don't understand at age 1 or 2.
Sure.
Let's wait until they're 5 or 10 when they can understand. Well, by then it's too late, right? And I share this because, I have a family member that really believed in that. And his child was out of control by the time he was like 7. And then he went to the next extreme. Now he's disciplining. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. You allowed him to act this way. Yeah. It's really your fault.
Yeah.
And if you had just recognized the problem early, identify, teach him, then he would understand. But all of a sudden now, you went completely like cold turkey.
Yeah.
You allowed him to do whatever you want, and all of a sudden you couldn't deal with it. And so now you're saying, hey, this is the discipline now. So, if it's training for parents, there is no book that you can really teach.
Yeah.
Right. I think it comes down to family values. I think dads need to be dads again. Moms should be allowed to be moms. We need to stop letting the exterior world interfere with our belief system. Time again, we do let the public and the mainstream media interfere with our home because we let it in. We allow them to not brainwash our kids, but let them have access to our kids. And if your kids are not strong enough to know what's the difference between right and wrong, is a huge influence for them.
Now, as you're mentioning that, what fell in my mind is most folks would, there's a line, isn't there, where government does government things and it steps aside and allows the community or the rest of us to live our lives, right? Because there's a
Depends which branch.
That's true.
Or which,
but there should be a line there where it's not crossed, is it? And what you're talking about there has nothing really to do with government. That's to do with community, families, and everything else, right?
Yeah.
But there was a big prudent point you touched on there, which was to do with things like the internet, online services, platforms, social media, AI. AI is going to be telling you what to do next. So that is something that can be sheltered from government officials, whether it's federal, state, whatever, depending on it, because a lot of that's coming from, especially if it's coming from on the business sector or what have you. Mm-hmm. Where do you see that line draws, or things that you can, I'll ask you a big question here, but where do you see that we fit in together and we can work together on that?
With AI and social media?
Yeah, with AI, social media, where the government can step in because it's not just,
Well, I think
maybe.
Well, anytime government steps in, free speech is a problem.
Right.
Where government should explore is how to regulate the safety of that.
I like that word, explore the safety of it.
Explore the safety of it, right? So when you have systems in place that might be hurting our country,
right,
we need to explore safety issues for that, right? But I do not advocate for interfering with free speech at all.
Right.
But I do advocate for a method in place to stop the illegal stuff that do happen on social media.
Because there's a lot out there.
There is. And I'll give you a good example, right? When I first got on council in 2020, it was COVID, civil unrest. They used social media to organize groups to go to the local malls, to ransack, I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm always constantly thinking, well...
That was reported on the news.
Yeah, that was reported. But so the problem was, right, there was no consequences for these folks when they post social media posts and, hey, show up here.
Right.
Because there was nothing really says that you can go after that person.
Right.
And you can't go after the social media platform for allowing them to post.
Right.
So I remember I tried to push a resolution to get the federal government and the state government involved. And it got shut down because, it was an issue with freedom of speech.
Sure.
I remember people would call me from other places in the country, say, how dare you, interfere with social media? And I said, no, I'm not interfering with social media. Right. What I'm interfering with is criminal behavior on social media, right? That's not freedom of speech. You can't outwardly say criminal things and think that's protected. And so, so I believe in that, where government needs to come in and make sure that we can regulate the criminal aspect of people who use the platform for criminal activities. So, but in general, I don't support government should be interfering. So I guess your question is, how do we balance that with community and social media? And it comes right back to the same answers: family values, right? So I trust my boys, right? I trust my two boys. Do I regulate what they see? No. You know why? Because I trust them, right? And I trust that they have a strong family grounded in my house,
right,
and my values, that they're not going to see something on social media and say, oh, that must be gospel and I better believe it.
Right.
They understand because I talk to them.
Right. Well, they're going to come and ask you potentially. Yeah.
Well, even if they don't, just from conversations I have with them, they know the difference between right and wrong. At least I hope so. And, they do know the difference between I'm trying to stay apolitical here, but, they know the difference between those that try to use a platform for certain agendas and versus, what's reality. And so I just think it really comes back to how you balance is you have to have families and parents still involved with their kids.
Right.
How often do you see, and I'm guilty of this too, right? But I also balance it with parental guidance with them. But how often do you see parents, even when kids they can't even talk yet, and to keep them distracted, to give them a cell phone? Right. And it's the easy way of parenting, right? Mm-hmm. But, back in the day when my boys were young, I would make weird noises, play sounds with them,
Right.
pick them up, and if they do say something wrong, I would check them. Right. And
Well, that's why restaurants still give you crayons and stuff.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Do they?
Some do.
Because
Some
my
do.
kids aren't
Some
small
of the
anymore.
family ones do. Yeah. We have a 6-year-old, and
Oh, okay.
they
There you
do.
go.
They still usually a lot of restaurants, especially more the family orientated restaurants.
Yeah.
They have a little crayon set there, and the kid can draw or do tic-tac-toe and things like that.
And Andrew, I mean, I'm sorry I keep on going back to not the same answer, but very similar families, right?
No, it's okay.
To me, we've lost a lot.
Yeah.
In the years, this country, my family came here for the opportunities, for the successes of others that we see. We wish it upon ourselves and others. And I just feel like in probably the last 10, 15 years, I think we lose that value.
Right.
It's almost not a value anymore. It's like so easily just to give it away. And, especially after just all that's been happening in the last, 3 years, 4 years, I think we need to bring it back.
Yeah.
I mean, what can we do to do that? I think we need to bring programs back. We need to bring resources back for the families. We got to just make sure that our families have the authority to be parents again.
Yeah.
We have to have parents feel comfortable that they can raise their kids. And then I just really feel that with that, we're going to make a difference.
Yeah.
With all these other things, the bullet points on my website and all these other issues homelessness, mental health, gosh, it all starts
at home
with one. It all starts with one person.
Yeah.
And, and then it branches out. It's all, there's a saying, it all starts with me.
Yeah.
Right? It all starts with you. And we forget that. And we always depend on others to take care of our problems, and we need to stop that. And we need to bring back the family values again, raise our kids, make sure they respect others. And that's another thing too. Actually, the respect is just, sometimes we lose value of that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even to today, I'm 50 years old. When I see my elders, I still don't feel like I'm 50. Maybe that's why. But when I see someone that's older than me, I give them the respectful title,
sure.
Sir.
Yeah.
Or in my language, we have certain titles we give. And I remember just talking to one of someone that was like about 20 years older than me. And there's a saying in Vietnamese, we call them, Joe, which is like uncle, or back, which is another version of uncle, or a more relatable age closer title, which is Adin, which is like big brother. But generally speaking, I've always tried to give respect to my elders. And he was 20 years older, and I called him Joe, which is uncle, right? And he looked at me. He's like, "Hey, how old are you?" And I'm like, "I'm 50." So, "Well, I'm only 70, and you're making me feel old." And I'm just so used to being respectful,
Yeah.
And he told me to call him big brother. But that's how I'm raised, right? And my kids, I keep on coming back to my boys. I'm very proud of them. My oldest, I remember, I just picked him up from college, and this is about 3 years ago. And these are things that when parents do something for the kids, you hope that it triggers something, they'll remember it.
Mm-hmm.
This is something where my kid did something, and I still to this day remember it. This is something where my kid did something, and I still to this day remember it. I took him to Costco to load him up with food. Him as we're walking, not really paying attention to him. He's to my side. And as I'm talking, I hear his voice be in the distance saying something to somebody else. So I turned real quick, and I see him helping this elderly lady with groceries. And, shame on me for just walking on by, right? And so I thought, oh my God, because maybe in my mind, she didn't look like she needed help.
Right.
But he took it upon himself to stop and said, "Would you need help?" And she said, "Sure." And he was and without saying a word to me or asking me, he just did it. And this was his, I want to say, first year in college.
Oh, that's cool.
And I looked at him like, I just left him alone.
Yeah.
I just looked at him, and I just remember thinking, wow, I did all right.
Yeah.
And he's so.
It's a proud dad moment.
Yeah. Family values to me is the most important thing. Because again, we've lost, so much is going on with family values. They want our kids to believe certain things. They want, they just leave it alone. Let the family deal with it.
Yeah.
Let us be independent of all the crazy things that are going around us, and let us be families and parents again.
as we move along, and you were talking about family values and obviously some type of programs to help families get back on track with this. This leads us into education.
Yeah.
Education's a big point.
Big.
And I'm sure you have quite a bit to say about that too. So how do you feel that education is going? Do you feel that they're losing out on funding now? Is that a problem? Is it not? I mean, where do you sit with it?
This is a hot topic. My wife's a teacher, by the way.
You mentioned that earlier. I thought there would be a little bit
my
of
wife's a teacher. And I see the struggle she has. I mean, just recently we went to buy some stockings for her classroom and for her coworker. She's going to kill me for me telling you this, but so we went to Walmart, I believe. I think it was Walmart, yeah, or Target, and we bought 50 stockings. And I was like, "What's this for?" It's like, "It's for my classroom." And I'm just thinking, all right. And the whole time I was thinking, teachers do so much on their own time, with their own money, for the kids, while school districts waste money and spend things on programs that don't help teachers to do the things that the teachers want to do for their kids, right? And I say that, and it's because, to me, schools have to focus on education. Kids come first. And, the teachers union is not going to like this, but because my wife's a teacher, so I feel comfortable saying it, but students come first, not teachers. And, time again, we forget that. And so unions and folks always focus on the teachers' unions. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little political here, but we lose track of why the teachers are there, and it's for the kids. And going back again, family values, again, I'm sorry to say, but our schools sometimes fail in helping our families teach family values. Instead, they do the complete opposite. They indoctrinate things that they shouldn't. They should focus on education, math, English, history, and so forth, and let the families teach the values, the social issues, right? And so, so to me, when you talk about money, when you talk about funding, I don't believe the teachers get enough. It's because the district doesn't pass it down to them.
Okay.
Teachers are where the money needs to go. Right. Teachers need. I mean, when you see my wife and her coworkers going out there spending their own money just so their kids can experience Christmas. Right. And we're more than happy to do it. But it brings up the bigger question. So why are teachers, who I feel are underpaid for the things that they're expected to do, why are they doing it when the district, some of these highly, ranking district members are getting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars? Why are the teachers going out there spending their own money?
Now, do you think, because you mentioned this earlier about when folks do things for their own, like, political gain, let's say, do you feel that maybe some of that has to do with districts are playing the political game and that's why they're spending money somewhere?
Absolutely.
Or because they became more like a corporation and they're looking like, well, I need to make reserves, or what do you see?
It's both. School, to me, school is a business. Because each kid, there's a dollar sign on each kid, right? And the state gives funding. The state gives funding to, like, kids that are present and who are absent and so forth. And then there's a political thing. What's interesting is school district, to me, is some of the most political boards out there. Sometimes even more political than city councils. Or county supervisor seats. The school boards are very political, and it shouldn't be. It should all be about the education of the kids, right? But yet they focus on social issues instead of just a simple educating our kids.
And why do you think it's swayed that way?
It's because of where you live. We're in California, and unfortunately, I don't want to get political, but I guess I should.
Well, you should do. Because it's okay. It's okay.
Because you told me you're trying to stay neutral, but at the same time,
it's okay. You don't have to be.
I think that the teachers, the unions have lost sight of what they're there for, and it's for the kids. and you provide the resources to the teachers for the kids. And so the unions nowadays are more involved in political issues than just making it simple, basic funding for the kids. Right. I say that I'll say this, for example, Prop 50. The CTA spent how many millions for Prop? I mean, what does that have to do with kids? Right. You can argue all, the
well, where the money's coming for districts, I suppose that's what an argument could be, right?
But really, the money's coming from the state of California.
Sure.
Right.
It's one big pot, right?
Right. It was supposed to come from the state of California, right? And so, but they're gerrymandering a congressional district, right? And I get that in Congress, there's some things going on with the educational department as well. I get that. But I really look at, like, how is that helping our kids? And to me, it really should be just simple. Life is a lot simpler if you just kind of just narrow down what your purpose is in life, right? And what you need to do instead of worrying about all these bigger things. Because when you just focus on what your job is, it actually makes it a lot easier and simple, right? And to me, the funding that the teachers union use are for things that shouldn't necessarily be for political. It should always be for the kids. And of course, they'll argue that, right? They'll argue that. And it's interesting because, like I said, my wife's a teacher. And her union, is part of it as well. And teachers, I get that they want to support this. Not all, by the way, the unions, I should say. But at the same time, these same teachers are like, what about us? And what about our kids? And to me, the teachers union is so strong, but if they're so strong, one teacher shouldn't have to go out there and spend their own personal money to support their classroom. They should all be funded for that.
So do you feel in Congress, that is something that you would look at changing through legislation, where if there were funds coming, there would be sort of like stipulations or where those funds should go? Where do you sit with that?
Again, so me being a Republican,
sure,
less government is my policy, right? So I can't just all of a sudden say, oh, when it benefits me or it benefits, anti-union, that we should interfere and write legislation to interfere that, right? And I think that's the problem sometimes. It's like we're one party, but we forget what our tenets are, our policies are, and I'm just talking about the Republican, I'm probably both sides.
Sure.
But what we can do is allow resources and an opportunity to make it legal for teachers, if they want to pull out of their unions, to do so.
Oh, okay.
And to also be a part of another program where they won't get penalized or get covered for benefits moving forward, right? And so it should be independent. It should be and again, this is part of me being a conservative, and Republicans, I believe in independency, right? And so teachers should be allowed to pick and choose what union they want to be in, not the only one that's there at their school,
okay,
or the school district. And in doing so, now it creates competition. And so they're going to say, well, we just lost a few of our members because they didn't believe in what we do. We should stay out of politics and just make sure we just support the very essence why we exist, is our students and our teachers. Same thing with the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
You stay out of politics because your existence is to help businesses and those who are elected into office to work with them, regardless of their party.
Right.
So when you're allowed to be independent, and then all of a sudden, because I believe, there is a program out there that allows teachers to join a different union or a different group, but it's not widely accepted. And so how do unions really control their members is where their union dues go. It covers their benefits, legal defense. I know this because I'm a police officer. I was part of the association. It's very important that we get represented, right? So that's how they control it. But when it's free market, eventually these unions will start losing members, and and that's why they don't want it, because they can control their members, right? And so I just think it needs to be a free market. There's a purpose for everything.
Right.
You just got to compete for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then so legally, I was looking to how we can allow these union members to join whatever they want, if it's another unit somewhere that gives better benefits, or because they believe their cause is stronger. Right now, there's a stronghold that if you work for this company or this group, you have to
you're
be
stuck there, are
you
you?
got to
Okay.
pay your member dues, and then our board directs what happens.
Wow.
And I use this, and again from experience, is that when I was a police officer as the president of I was actually the president of the Police Officer Association.
Okay.
Which in essence you can call it a union, but we believe it's not, just because we're an association. One of the things that separates us from unions is we don't have the right to strike.
No, exactly.
There's no work,
Thank God.
right? Yeah, well, there's a good reason for it, right? And we take an oath to serve. So regardless of what our benefits are, what we believe, how much we should get paid,
Right.
ultimately we took an oath to protect our community.
Sure.
And we're not going to just stop just because our benefits aren't there, right?
Right.
And so, when I was president, we moved from one group into another group, and because that group allowed for independency, and it just worked better for us. It was a lot cheaper too, and it's been great for our members. And when I was the president of the association, I remember, and I was a safety committee member at the time in Cerrito, so I had like the experience of being in a public sector as a, not elected, but as appointed. So I was dealing with politics a little bit. And I became the president of the association. I remember going to the city council in Torrance, and I just introduced myself, kind of like what you're planning on doing tonight, right? Just going to say, hey, I'm the new president. And this is the time when they're negotiating our package, I believe. And I just told them, look, I just wanted to be very clear with you here. And me, first time a president just showed up at a council meeting just to speak. I want to be very clear with the council. First, I want to introduce myself. I'm the new president, and I want you to know that no matter what happens at the table, I promise you basically that our members will continue to serve this city regardless. And, I walked away, and then, because, we took an oath, we believed in it, and we're going to continue to work, So that's why we're different. And we're not really a union in a sense, because we don't have the right to strike.
The way you mention it there, all I'm thinking is what you'd mentioned very early on about freedom. Mm-hmm. And freedom of, the speech, freedom of, doing what you'd like to do.
Yeah.
And it's almost like your freedom's taken away if you're told you can only join that one group. Or it's not really.
Well, yeah, technically it's a choice when you apply to work there.
Well, sure.
So, you do have an option sometimes. It's completely not be a member at all and not pay your member dues.
Oh, okay.
But then you don't have any coverage.
I see.
You don't have you lose benefits that the union promises. So they give you a reason why you should join, and they definitely punish you if you don't, in the sense that they don't, everything that you deserve they'll take away.
Right.
To me, it's all about allowing the folks to decide on their own in everything, though.
Right.
And in life, I'm big on that. It's like, hey, less government intrusion. Let government be there to protect us. Government shouldn't tell us what our rights are. They should be there to protect our rights.
That's a really. You're great at segueing without even knowing. So another part is so a couple of weeks ago we interviewed Lisa Ramirez, who's also running for Congress in a different district, mm-hmm. and she's an immigration lawyer. And one of the topics she mentioned is that there needs to be immigration reform, as in they need to go back. The 40 years that they've had it, they haven't re-looked at it, and they need to go back. And it's funny, you said something very similar to that about the system with taxes. We need to go all the way back and figure it out. Where do you stand, and what do you see politically even regarding immigration, border management, legal pathways?
Yeah, so first off, nothing's ever
cut and dry,
but nothing's ever fixed.
No.
So when you say, let's go back and look at things, we should always go back and re-examine things. We can't just say, hey, this is the way it is forever.
Right.
Everything should be evolving, policies, laws, procedures, and so forth. We should always make sure that we look at it and see is it evolving in a way that makes sense for our time. Right, because America today is different than 1776.
Sure.
Right? So we have to constantly evolve. Right. So for someone to say, "Yeah, we need to go back and fix it," I agree. but not just fix it, just to fix it, to make it better, to make it current for what
fit in today's life.
Today's lives, right? That the impacts on our lives today are different than 30, 40 years ago, right? And so, so I agree that we should always look back. Immigration, what I see today is, well, first off, I believe in immigration laws, right? We're not a country if we don't enforce our immigration laws. Not a lot of countries out there have, well, before Trump, had borders that are so wide open that anyone just cross. Gosh, when I go to other countries, I'm scared to death of their laws. I make sure I follow the rules, because the last thing I want to do is get in trouble in a foreign country, right? But I don't think we have that level of concern when foreigners come to our country illegally. And so we definitely need to enforce our laws. We need to make sure that our borders are definitely secure. We are not safe when we don't have a secure border. And the way we're located geographically, it's easy to cross our borders illegally. And so we need to make sure we protect it. Immigration today, the way it's being enforced, one of the things that I've said, and I think Lisa brought it up to you, is that my approach as a law enforcement officer is, what I'm seeing is that we need our immigration agents to get more resources, more training, and the hiring behind it to make sure we're hiring the best of the best when it comes to individuals that are given guns and badges to enforce federal laws, right? We should not cut corners when it comes to background checks. We should not cut corners when it comes to training, to let our agents, one, make sure they have the training to protect themselves, but also protect the folks that they have to enforce, right? And then protect the community. And then three, they give them the resources that they need to follow through on the enforcement side of it, right? And I say this, and I'll use this as an example. And, it depends how you take it. But, you have, when you see on TV, the media, right? You see these agents going out there, enforce the law. They work hard. Their lives are threatened. They have to a point where they have to protect their identity, right? People keep on saying, like, oh, why are they doing that? People forget that they're in danger as well, because of the far left that are going out there. I mean, far left, far left, right? They're going out there purposely trying to, reveal who they are, where they live, their families. As a police officer, that was our one biggest concern from the day I started the academy to the day I retired, still to this day.
I bet, yeah.
Is that you hope people don't know that you're a police officer.
Sure.
It's hard for me now because I'm running for office, right?
Right.
But the one thing they trained us early on is do whatever you can so you don't identify yourself as a police officer off duty.
Right.
And when you're working, just make sure. Some of us, at some point, they even said, hey, you might not even want them to know that you have a family. Right. So a lot of police officers, what they do is when they're working, they'll take their ring and they'll wear it as a necklace.
Sure.
So that way, when the people they deal with don't know that they're married and have families and stuff and so forth, right? So this is something new where law enforcement officers are placed in danger because of what they do. So people don't even talk about that. They're just constantly, oh, you need to identify yourself. You need to do, and I get that. And we're a land of laws, and as government, we should be able to identify ourselves, right? Because we're the government coming, right? But uniforms they wear. There's no secret in who they are, right? Clearly identified what agencies they are. Now, can you also say that anyone can just go buy that stuff? Well, anyone can today buy anything.
That's true,
right? But at the end of the day, when you see things on the media, the hardest thing for me to see as a law enforcement officer is this: these agents are putting themselves in danger and putting the folks that they have to enforce these laws also at risk, right? And I say this because I really believe that they would appreciate more training, because when you talk to law enforcement officers, police officers, they'll tell you, like, we don't approach a car and just open up the door and yank people out.
Right.
That's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not just dangerous for the person that they're dealing with, but for themselves, because you don't know who's that person in the car. You don't know they got guns. So we approach very cautiously, but we always get the job done. It may take a little longer, and maybe that might be the issue, is that they don't have that luxury of time. But I'll tell you right now, there's no time in the world that you can bring back if an agent gets hurt or killed. So safety is utmost importance when it comes to enforcing laws, right? So as the whole immigration thing is, and I've said this many places, is that I want to make sure that the agents get the resources they need, the training that they need, and we don't cut corners and backgrounds when we come to hiring some of these. And I'm not questioning these agents. I think they're outstanding when it comes to the work they do. And you only see a small percentage of this on TV, right? All the good stuff, they don't mention all the self-deportation. They don't mention just the simple arrest that these agents make where there's no issues, no use of force. The media is only going to show the ones that they want to show, right? So it's maybe 10% of it. But unfortunately, that 10% everyone sees, and now it's magnified. And we always, as law enforcement, always make sure that we do it right, but also do it right when there's people around, because we don't want the public to say that, hey, you guys are bad guys.
Right.
We do everything we can to make sure that we are the good guys. And I mean, it's looking good also when it comes to the media, and so unfortunately, when we see things like officers going out there and doing things, sometimes I cringe because I'm like, oh my God, that's just not safe.
Right.
And so at the level of where I'm going, I want to make sure that our agents get the training they need, and definitely the resources. And then I would like to look into, the hiring, because I was a background investigator for 6 years.
Right.
I hired a lot of police officers. And I'll tell you, we turned away a lot.
I bet. No, right.
We turned away a lot.
Yeah.
And so, for me, 1 out of 1,000 is a lot better than hiring 1,000, because even though you may need 1,000, that 1,000 is going to bring in more problems than that one person that you vetted. You made sure that they have a great background and they're here for good reasons, and.
Now, I don't wish to put you on the spot here, because I am by the question.
Yeah.
And believe you me, it's not loaded. It's you mentioned there, obviously, which is very important. I totally understand that from being a veteran, is that training is very important.
Yes.
The right type of people are important.
Yes.
And you're also talking about timing. So in what you're seeing as an individual, it's just happened too quick, pushing it through too fast? It wasn't really strategically thought out, because there's a lot more that needed to go into the planning. Do you feel that that's also part of this?
So the problem is, it's gone on so long without enforcement that we do need enforcement today, right?
Okay.
And so part of it is that we need to do something today. If we continue to just wait on it, then you have a problem that you continue. So I get your question to say, hey, is the Trump administration doing this too fast, too much, and right now, right? And it needed to be done. For one, it needed to be done, and it needed to be done because it's gone on so long without the enforcement, and the message was sent early on, right?
Right.
But once you start enforcing and the word's out, then you kind of maybe slow it down a little bit and say, hey, let's make sure, because we don't want our agents getting hurt. We don't want our agents getting shot. We don't want, and so we need to continue to reevaluate as we move on. It shouldn't just be one clear mission and then you just kind of just keep on going with it.
Running with it, right.
It evolves like anything else, and you see how you can evolve it and evaluate it to make it serve the purpose for the time and for the resources you have.
Right.
And that's police work in general, though. We constantly always have to reevaluate. And so to answer your question, is it happening too fast? I think it needed to be done now instead of waiting. But then we have to keep on evaluating as we go. And, the message is out there. It's getting enforced. And it's just, we just need to make sure that we continue to do it in a manner that protects the agents and also sends a clear message. So I hope that answers the question.
No, and it does, because it seems like that. It seems to me like it's keep like rushing. And as you mentioned, I think it lands on both sides. More importantly, one thing you touched there is, training on, how people approach a situation, but you are also putting those other people in a danger zone, because if you're not trained properly as to also how to protect them as they're in your care, your trust, your whatever you want to call it, there is a sense of problems there, because many people, if you're hitting a crowd, an angry crowd, you don't know how they're going to respond. And if you're unable to get through that situation, and at the same time, you're now and you're in charge to protect those people you're actually also going after.
We're Americans. We protect people.
Yeah,
we are Americans, and regardless of what our job is, we're there to serve America with the mentality, with the values of Americans, right? And we don't just go up there haphazardly just to do things, right?
Sure.
We protect those we serve, we protect those we have to enforce, and we protect those who have to do the enforcement, right? So yeah, it's very important. It's very important that, to me, those are American values.
Right.
Like when we go to other countries and we, at war, we still follow certain guidelines, right?
Yeah, so the rules, yeah.
Right, set of rules, and those are American rules, right? We should be proud Americans for doing that.
So moving on with that, because it sort of lives with it as well, and it's we're seeing a lot with the sending. Well, it's not U.S. troops, is it? Well, they are, but they're sort of home guard, so it's not like the overall military that we're seeing. It's another part, and obviously you also mentioned briefly before about San Francisco and how that was a bit of a mess, and that needs cleaning up and things like that. So where do you see this politically? You're a congressman, let's say now, and these are things that are going on. These are things that are on your desk. Where do you see you're going to go? What are things you'd like to suggest? How do you feel
for
you can
public
help?
safety? You mean?
Yeah, for public safety, for engagement with what's going on right now with
the military,
immigration, or even local. So call it local, because it's not like our overall U.S. military landing on the doorstep of people. Like, where do you see that going?
Well, I mean, if it was up to me, it was all up to me.
That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
It was all up to me. We need to look at the policies and the procedures that we are implementing right now. And if you're talking, I think you're talking about immigration in general, safety, is that we need to make sure, again, it's going back to the same thing, is that our officers are gatekeepers, right? We need to give them the resources and the training that they need. So it was up to me. What I've done as a hiring guy or as a police officer is that we give the authority to those who serve us, the authority to do it the way legally to do it, but to stop second guessing them. And to make sure that they're out there doing their job that they're supposed to do. And if for 1 second, if they decide to break those rules, then there's consequences, right? Being a leader is about leading with examples. And, and that's how I've always been. If I'm not willing to do it myself, I'm not going to tell someone else to do it. So I think it's important that you have to show leadership. You have to show that you're willing to back those that support you, and those that you ask to do a job that is difficult, to always be present, and to, so it was all up to me. I would definitely be there. I'm not a guy that sits behind a desk. God, that's the last thing I want to do. I will be there, and I'll be up there with everybody, and I just don't like to stand behind the scenes. I think it's for selfish reasons. When those who serve you feel like you serve them and they feel proud to be with you, it makes me feel good. It's for selfish reasons, it makes me feel good.
Right.
Because, when I look out there and, and my constituents in Cerritos, when they tell me, gosh, we miss you, we need you back, it just feels good. Right. Because it tells me I did a good job.
Good job, right.
And then the ones that were second guessing me, the ones that were anti Chuong Vo, and then when I got into office and I did what I did, regardless of how they felt or what they thought I was going to do, and time again, I always did what was right. And then they realized, my gosh, we were wrong about you.
Right.
And so that to me is very valuable to me. And it just, so to answer your question, if it was up to me, I think we need to value people again. We need to make sure that our job is about the people. And I kind of mentioned earlier before we got on camera, it's like there's politics, policy, and to me, people should be on top of the list.
Right.
And then from there, it goes right down to policies and politics. And so it's important that we serve the people. And yeah, I'm a people guy.
Yeah. And so, moving through that, and coming back to really what we're here today, and we've learned an awful lot about you, and I really appreciate everything you've shared, because we've covered quite a lot.
Yeah. You're the first.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm so great. That's pretty cool. With this candidacy and all the work that has to go into it, because it's hard work. People don't see that.
Campaign.
You're giving up an awful lot. Your family are going to be giving up a lot. You are as well. You're basically giving yourself in service. Again, it's just a continuation, isn't it? Checking in. How is your campaign going? What are you seeing out there? Well,
appreciate you checking in. It's always nice when people check in to see how I'm doing. It's hard running a campaign. I started running a campaign locally as a city council. At this level, it's completely a different monster. It's congressional, it's federal, and it's just, we touch on this real quick. What it means to me that I was even asked to run for Congress, right? You have a guy named Chuong Vo that just came from Vietnam and just decided one day that not serving as a police officer wasn't enough, and so I said I'm going to go into politics, right? And then all of a sudden I serve, and then I got recognition that, hey, I did a decent job. A refugee from Vietnam, and then was asked to run for Congress. To me, I feel like if you're asking me checking in, I feel like I'm a winner already.
Yeah.
How often do you have the opportunity to be recognized as somebody that is of service, and then also be asked to run for even bigger office, right? So to me, I feel like I'm already a winner, and so for that, I thank everybody. This campaign is a lot of work. This is something that came out of a retirement that, I retired from the council in March, and then retired as police officer in June. And then 1 month later, I get phone calls, and I'm very flattered, very appreciative. And after months of thought and consideration with my family, we decided, hey, let's do it, and since then, it's just been go, 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 go.
Sure.
It's just been nonstop, meeting people like you, Andrew. And the best part, and again, I'm a people person, the best part is meeting people.
Right.
And I tell people, if you just put me in front of somebody, I truly believe I can win the hearts and the minds of those folks once they get to know me.
Right.
Because, I'm not someone out here that's just going to, BS you to death. I'm going to tell you how I really feel. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, then vote for the other person.
Sure.
I mean, that's democracy, right? Yeah. That's the whole election process.
Yeah.
And so why am I going to lie to you so you can vote for me, and then I just do something completely different?
Right.
So at the end of the day, if I'm the best candidate, I want you to believe that I am, and you'll vote for me. If I'm not in your eyes, then vote for the other person, right? And that's just the way it works. I won't get offended. It won't be personal. So it's just go, 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 meeting great people. What I really enjoy is meeting those that disagree with me, so we have a conversation, and I learn a lot from those folks as well. But yeah, it's been a go thing. Fundraising is one of those things that, as a congressional candidate, is nonstop. You run every 2 years, and that's what I'm learning as well, is that fundraising, you just got to do it.
Right.
The hardest thing I've always, just the way I was raised, the hardest thing is you earn your own money and you do what you need to do. The hardest thing for me, except when I started running for office, was asking other people's money.
Right.
And I've gotten good at it now. Though.
Yeah, well, that's good.
I've gotten
good. Could learn something from you, because I have a terrible time asking. I'm good at earning, but not as asking.
I've always said, I can't do it myself. I don't tell other people to do it, right? And so in that instance, though, where I've changed a little bit is that I see those folks that don't have the opportunity to serve like me. That see those folks that may feel, lack of a better term, like shy about being in politics. The quiet majority type of folks that you really don't want to put themselves out there, right? And I said, "Yeah, that's me. I will do it for you."
Yeah.
I'll hopefully speak what you believe in. I hopefully have the vision that you see. I hope that I have the actions that you would do. But yet you don't have to do it. Let me do it.
Right.
And in doing so, though, I need your help. I need your support. I need I need your money. And the only reason why is I can't do any of this without that, because I can be the greatest candidate in the world, but without the funding, without the support, without the donations, my voice doesn't get heard at all, right? Unfortunately, in today's time, like here in the media, and thank you for doing this for free, by the way. But at the end of the day, it is spending money to get my voice out there to let people know that I am the candidate that will serve you, and so it's been exciting. I met really. I can't say enough about meeting great people because, being from LA County, being in LA County politics, it's hard sometimes to cross they call it the orange curtain, right?
Sure.
Right. And so I'm able to now cross the orange curtain. So, and meet so many good people from Orange County. It's a very conservative county as well. It's nice to meet, like-minded people, but also, like I said, I also am very interested in meeting those who may disagree, but have a civil conversation. And then so we can both learn from each other. I actually enjoy those conversations sometimes more,
right?
Because there's perspectives that I've never understood before, and that's just who I am. So campaign wise, I've been working hard, meet and greets, doing fundraisers where I can. It's hard right now because of the holidays.
Sure.
So in our respect of the holidays, I'm trying to step back a little bit, but starting at the beginning of next year, it's going to be go, go, go again.
Right.
And, if you like, you can donate to my campaign too. But at the end of the day, though, it's a privilege for me, though. It's not really, it is a lot of work, but to me, I look at it as a privilege, as an honor. I can't believe I'm even sitting here talking to you about my life. I never thought I would do this when I was young. I just wanted to be a cop. That's all I wanted to be.
So how do people learn more about you or are able to donate? What's the process?
Yeah, so it's very easy. You can go to my website, which is vo4congress.com, spelled V as in Victor, O as in Ocean, the number 4, congress.com. And obviously, Vo is my last name. And then you can go on there. You can read about me. You can also call me. If you want to give me a call, my number is 562-267-9911. And my email, you can also email. My email is also there on my website. Email me at C as in Charles, V as in Victor, at vo, number 4, congress.com. And so, yeah, you can always reach out to me. I love answering questions. And if anyone wants to reach out to me and leave their number and you want me to call them, I'll give them a call.
Now, we always give our guests some time to free mic time because you've answered a lot of questions. Thank you so very much. And basically, this could be whether it's could be a pitch in your instance, or it might just be some final words. But we want to give you that time where you can just free mic it for a few moments there and share whatever you like.
Well, first off, thank you, Andrew, for inviting me here. This is, like I said, this is the first time I've actually done a podcast in my whole entire career, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, so you're the first, and it's been really, really fun. I had a great time. And just for those that are watching out there, again, hopefully I've given you some insight in who I am. I am who I am. What you see is what you get. I'll work. I'm a service-oriented person. I believe in public service. Like I said, politicians are ones that, just fill the seat, and public service is all about the serving the people that put you in that seat. And I'm all about people. I love to serve. I love people. I'm out there all the time trying to find reasons how I can make things better. I'm a fixer. People tell me sometimes it's hard for me to say no, because when people need something, I try to fix it. It's just at the end of the day, you're going to get a true public servant that's out there to really work for the right reasons. And I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you why I truly believe in this. It's because, and I've said it before, this is a great country. This is, Ronald Reagan had a speech where if you go to Japan, you can't be Japanese. You go to, Germany, you can't be a German. But everyone that comes to America can be American.
That's true.
right? And so this is why I believe so much in this country. This is a country that, and my dad had the opportunity when we were sponsored to different countries. He picked America for the values that he believed, and I'm glad he did. This is the greatest nation in the world, and it gave me the opportunity to raise my family, gave me a lifestyle that I'll always love and appreciate. And this is a country where I want to die in. And so my service to this country is not just because I want to do it. I feel like it's an obligation for me, because I don't know what my life would be if I was in Vietnam right now. I wouldn't know what my life would be or what my family would be if I didn't have the opportunities that this country gave me and my family. So because of that, I truly believe in service. I believe in doing what's right. And I think that separates me a lot from some other candidates, is that, all my life I've served.
Right.
I've served. And I'm talking about my adult life, right? And I don't think any candidate can say that they served for 28 years, 26 at my past job, but 28 total law enforcement served. And on top of that, I ran for city council,
right?
And it just wasn't enough for me. And now I'm running for Congress. It just wasn't enough for me. And so, I just want to get the opportunity to let the people see that I will prove those who are in disagreement with me wrong, and those that believe in me, I'll make them proud.
Well, Chuong, thank you so very much for your time today.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate it. It's been an honor and a privilege listening to you and learning more about you. Yeah. And no matter what, I wish you all the very, very best of luck. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Chamber Talk. Until next time, stay inspired and connected by visiting nocchamber.com and selecting sign up for news at the homepage. For more interviews, visit chambertalk.podbean.com.